Go.
Hi, I'm Peyton, and this is my group member, Brandon. We're going to give an analysis on how satire is used as an attack on this book, How to Be Black by Thurston. Two of the big historical particulars used in this book repeatedly are Black culture and racism. Black culture looks back on how African Americans were treated, and this book often doesn't bring up history per se, but talks about diversity and how Blacks are looked at as special. This book makes lots of jokes about racism and shows how Blacks are looked at in a special way, which is why it is satirized to bring humor and exaggeration to the book. What is satire? Satire is an attack by means of manifest or fiction upon discernible historical particulars. The three forms that we found that were used in this book are sarcasm, irony, and exaggeration. It seems to make jokes that are above and beyond using exaggeration, and it will be sarcastic as we have examples of these in the slides coming up. These are very typical ways which people go about satirizing a book.
As Peyton said, our first historical particular was racism. Here we have a quote from Thurston on page 10 where he says, "By completing all 10 items, you have proven your commitment to the Black American community far and above and beyond." Whoa, we just changed it. Was far and above and beyond what is necessary. In addition to all the benefits associated with the lower level awards, you have also earned the right to attend 2 secret Black meetings a year, the unconditional forgiveness of one racist outburst, and a reusable tote bag. This is an example of Thurston using irony and sarcasm to get his point across. In this section of the book, Thurston is mocking racism by giving out awards to excused racism like they are participation trophies, with the irony being that the more Black activities that you do, the more racism you can get away with. This is also sarcastic because nobody would ever give you an award for doing any of Thurston's Black activities because they were all either outrageous requests or common sense. This is a shot at people who are racist who try to make up for their racism by doing things that they consider to have racial equality. This is the second quote we have here is from page 176 where Thurston says, "Many of the Black people around you act like race doesn't define everything in the world. It's your job to remind them that it does. When communicating with your fellow Black people, make sure to sprinkle your speech with a lot of my brother and my sister language. This adds credibility to your case and builds a connection with any other Black person around you at the time." This is an example of Thurston using exaggeration as a medium for his satire. In this section of the text, Thurston is talking about the angry Negro, which is a person he creates to inform other people about the racism occurring around them. The exaggeration in this instance is that the mannerisms Thurston is telling you to use while having a conversation with another Black person is all out of date. This is an attack on what Thurston later calls in the book post-racial America because his slang is dated in the past. So he's implying that American racism is still like it was in the past and it's still getting worse.
Another one of our quotes from page 53 is, "I was pretty Black for a Black guy. I arrived suffering from a medical condition known as Ebonics, or Black English vernacular." This shows that they're satirizing Ebonics in the book, the way people talk, because it says medical condition, but Ebonics really isn't a medical condition. This is exaggerating the way they talk. And people often just say it's the way inner city people talk, as it's different because it's not our normal way of talking, although normal is different from everybody. Then our next quote on page 54 by Thurston is, "An Oreo is somebody who's Black on the outside and white on the inside." He then pointed to a student I hadn't met yet and said that the kid was an Oreo. This is a very racist thing to say, and you never see white people being compared to foods like bananas or anything. So therefore, he's kind of trying to be funny in the book. And just by people saying this, it shows that many Black people were often attacked, but not white.
Our second historical particular was Black culture. And on page 81, Thurston writes, "By having a Black friend, white Americans automatically inoculate themselves against most changes of racism and capture some of the rebellious spirit that has made this country what it is. They become cooler by association. It is commonly known that in pop culture, Black culture is the main enforcer. This makes Black culture the quote-unquote cool culture, which means that most people want to be a part of it. Thurston uses this knowledge as a foundation for most of the book, which is why it's so easy for him to use it here in this ironic quote to critique how people are trying to latch on to Black culture because it is popular. The irony of the situation is that just being friends with a Black person does not make you a part of their culture, and therefore you are not associated with its coolness. That would be like playing flag football in a recreational league and thinking you were good enough to make it to the NFL. It's just two different leagues. The second quote we have here is from page 84, where Thurston writes, "You won't be of much value to Black people or anyone else if you don't maintain a cultural connection to Black experiences. Like a reporter who clings to the newsroom rather than step outside and actually walk his beat, you will lose your effectiveness. In a practical sense, this means that you need to maintain a baseline level of Black cultural currency by being familiar with at least some of the history of Black people, of trends in Black entertainment. This goes for music, film, sports, etc., as well as language and style." In this portion of the text, Thurston's focal point is cultural connection. In order for you to be of any value, you have to be in touch with your culture. Thurston uses the term cultural currency to identify a person's worth in relation to their culture, which is ironic because in society we commonly use wealth as an identifier for people of higher status. The attack in this instance is on people who do not have a strong cultural connection because they are not worthy enough to enlighten everyone on their culture. Another quote we had for Black culture was on page 150, where Thurston writes, "In job number 2, you'll be expected to, Part A, represent the Black community, Part B, defend the company against charges of racism or lack of diversity, and Part C, increase the coolness of the office environment by enthusiastically participating in company events." In this part of the text, Thurston is talking about being the Black employee and all the jobs that it entails. In this quote, Thurston uses sarcasm and irony to make two distinct attacks. There's obviously some sarcasm thrown in by Thurston because simply adding a Black person to your workforce does not make it cooler, which reinforces what Thurston already wrote on people trying to latch onto Black culture for its coolness. Additionally, there's also irony in that a Black employee has to defend the company, whether they are racist or not, because they are the minority in the workplace, which reinforces that we are not in a post-racial era.
Our next quote or kind of line from the book is from the table of contents. It says, "Introduction, thanks for celebrating Black History Month by acquiring this book." This is a humorous way of being sarcastic by saying thanks for celebrating Black History Month. Just because you read a book once doesn't automatically make you Black, which is kind of repeated throughout the book, just like how they talk about having one Black friend doesn't make you diverse. Also, it seems that not many white people celebrate Black History Month, so it's trying to be funny in a sarcastic way at the start of the book.
Summary. In How to Be Black, Thurston utilizes sarcasm, irony, and exaggeration to address racism and Black culture. Through his attacks, he proclaims that people need to stop trying to force themselves into Black culture and they instead need to master their own. Thurston also argues that in order for America to move on to be a better racial era, people need to stop justifying their racism under false pretenses of racial objectivity.
The argument this book makes is that people much too often try to be something they are. Not everyone understands everything about a certain culture, and to be a better society, we need to learn from each other. Like the book says, just because you have one Black friend, as I mentioned earlier, doesn't make you diverse, as much people think today. There's much more to it, and we can't pretend like the world that we live in is completely okay and everyone's the same because they're not. Yes, everyone is equal, but different races have different cultures than others.
Discussion questions. Our first discussion question was, how much influence do you think a person's culture has on their actions? I brought this up because in the book, Thurston is talking about how white people are trying to latch onto other people's culture. So another culture is motivating them to do something. I was wondering if somebody's own culture has the same impact. And the second question we had was, should employers have to hire a certain number of people from a particular race? Why or why not? And that's everything.